Welcome everybody. I'm Craig, K9CT, and you probably don't know me, maybe some of you do, but anyhow, I like DXing and I like contesting and I like building stations. I have a station not too far from here. If you ever want to take a ride out west and take a look at it, it's only 15 miles away. But I have a big contest station there, and next weekend, in fact, we'll be doing CQ Worldwide Ready there, and I'll have a team of other operators. So I've been doing this since 1967. And I love ham radio. It's a lot of fun. That was last century, by the way, for some of you. And I know some of the people in the audience, and I know you've heard me talk before, so I hope I don't bore you. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about a trip we just took. And it was in planning. Well, actually, almost the same team went to Sable Island last year, which is off the coast of Nova Scotia. And this is another DXEC entity called St. Paul Island, and it's off the northeast tip of Nova Scotia. And so I got asked to be involved with this. Is there a clicker here or not? No? No problem. So this is actually what it looks like where we went. Now St. Paul Island's bigger than this, but they call this a tittle that goes in between. And they won't let us go on this side because it's been shut off for environmental concerns. Previous DXpeditions had been allowed to go there. So this is kind of like Parks on the Air or whatever. For DXing, this is special. This is a special place to go. And we ended up right in here. You can see the tents that have been built. I'm actually in a helicopter when I took this picture, just flying in. So just to give you an idea what St. Paul Island is. So here's actually Nova Scotia, and they call this Cape Breton Island. You'd think it's part of the mainland, except that it's got water cuts all the way through it, so it ends up being an island. But we drove there from here. And the reason we did that was because I set up all the radio gear here in Trevoli, all of the computers, everything, and we were not allowed to take cardboard on the island. So we just decided to hand carry it because the Pelican cases would have been so large to hold it all that it would have been many, many helicopter trips and a lot of shipping costs. So we just decided, let's just drive out there. So we drove all the way actually to a place here, right on this tip. They call this Cape North. And what we wanted to do was go to this island right here, which is really not very far away. It's only 24 miles away. But you have to take a helicopter to get there. It's almost impossible to get on with a boat. Now there's some people that will go there with a boat, but most of the boats that have ever gone there have crashed and didn't want to be there because it was shrouded in fog. So the whole island of St. Paul is 3 miles and it's 1 mile width. Where we were was definitely not that. It might have been maybe a quarter mile in diameter, or any particular way to go on it. The highest elevation was nearby mountain. Where we were, the lighthouse, we were standing there, we were like 100 feet above sea level, and 50 feet above was the lighthouse. And they called that the tittle. The tickle is the Scottish name, because Nova Scotia is New Scotland, and there's a lot of Scottish people there, and they have their own names for everything, and they talk that way. So it's about 150 feet wide. So just a little bit about St. Paul is kind of interesting because I thought that the geography was amazing when we got there. But it's actually the extension of the Appalachian Mountains and the Breton Highlands. And the Breton, remember I said that was Cape Breton? And if you look across the way, there's really high mountains. And they're just like the Appalachian Mountains, just kind of worn down mountains over the centuries and millennia that have taken place. Come to find out, the island that we were on was actually part of Scotland and Northern Europe, and then the lower part of Nova Scotia came from Africa when the continents were that close and they were shoved together. And that's how much they drifted apart ever since. One thing that I thought also, just a side note, we were not far from Sydney. That's actually where an airport is. And that's not far from where Marconi set up a station to make the first broadcast across the ocean from Great Britain to North America. So, and of course, if you've ever read about that, he didn't know much about physics because the antenna was 300 feet tall, and it wasn't tuned. So he had a heck of a time making the connection between, because he didn't understand propagation, he didn't understand the physics associated with it. So it's just an interesting side note because just because we were in that area. Anyhow, a lot of the rock is granite. It's just shoved up from the crust of the earth. It has a nickname of the graveyard of the Gulf. And the reason is the St. Lawrence Seaway is literally right around the corner. And a lot of the ships go through that area. And what happens, you've got the ocean currents coming up from the Gulf of Mexico. They're warm, they hit that cold water, it creates fog just like that. And we stood there and just watch it, and it just rolls across the ocean, and the next thing you know, you're just shrouded in fog. And you could see why ships would just run right into that and just crash. They said over 1,000 people have died on that little bitty island that we were on. So you can imagine the traffic in the area. I'm reading a book right now about it, and about how they actually put life-saving missions on there to try to make sure that if sailors actually made it on, they put rabbits on the other island so that somebody could eat a rabbit at night. But there was no animals on the island that we were on, except maybe some birds that would be by. The lighthouse that we were next to the first lighthouse was put up in 1839. It's normally about 60 to 75 degrees in the time that we were there, and I would say it was maybe 55 to 82 degrees while we were there because it got quite warm, but the winds were amazing, always blowing. Some bugs hated a still. If there was a still time, you would meet the mosquitoes. Otherwise, the wind was your friend because you wanted to blow the bugs away. So why even go to a place like this? Well, it's not a place anybody can go. There's a reason that the XCC is hard to do, and that it's the #1 award that ham radio operators chase. So they always rank what's hard. This was number 50. There's 340 entities, so this would have been 290. Okay, just so to give you a perspective in terms of how often it's been activated, how hard it is for you to work, or to even have it on the air. So what we do was we studied the statistics associated with it. The last activity that was there was 16, and this was 19, but you can see all they did was operate data like FTA. And then in 2000, and CW. So you can see the activity, but you can see how rare it is on any band. If you look at, so this is rare, the reddish color, and light, and of course the blue is the least rare. So when you go to some place like this, you want to get on all the bands and try to talk to people. And you can see 160, 80 data, 60 meters was very rare. On up, you can just see, and even for US hams, in this area, it's very rare because it's too close for a skip. Usually it skips right over the top of you. The MUF is not high enough. So this last activities is kind of interesting to do. So how many QSOs did they make? 2005, 10,118. 2012, 18,441. 2016, right here, was 34,785. 2019 was 15,806. So you say, well, that's, there's 750,000 hams in the United States, and that's all they talk to. Or in the world, how many hams are there? 3 million? But that's all the people that got to talk to it. So there was an opportunity for us to go there and make some contacts. Just cut to the end, we ended up making over 114,000 contacts. So we kind of added all together, we made more than all of those activities together. So we really went at it with the idea we were going to take it down from 50 to 75 to 80 or whatever down the ranking to make it less rare. So this is what I said. Globally, it was ranked 50th. Eastern Europe is 52. Asia, like JA, Thailand, China, 19. VKZL number 34. So you can see if you were over in Japan, 19, that's pretty hard. Because what is the honor roll? What do you have to be to get on the DXCC honor roll? You have to be in the top 10. So if it's number 19, it gets you just that much closer when you're trying to make the honor roll, which is prestigious. Our team members, we had I'll show you pictures, but WA4DAN is Murray, co-leader, and of course Glenn Johnson, who you just talked to. Glenn did a lot of work and ended up going North Carolina, where he lives, and they actually worked on the project together, put together tents and practiced the setup, so we knew we had everything we needed. And so they were our co-leaders. Dan, W4DKS, I'd worked with him before when we went to Sable Island. Really a cool guy. He was a CIA agent. So, so kind of, it's always interesting to hear their background when you find out who you're going on a trip with. Scott, NE9U, he's from Wisconsin, up by the Minneapolis area, and him and I have done a lot of contesting together and DXing. We snowmobile together. He's a great friend. Super operator. We did WRTC last year together in Italy. Mike, K9NW, I've done a lot of DXpeditions. We call him Mikey the Machine because he can operate CW like nobody else, and he's just a riot to be around. And Lee, WW2DX, if any of you have worked us on moonbounds, satellites, or anything VHF, Tropo, or, well, I said EME, but Meteor Scatter, maybe you did that too. But he was the guy that's solely what he did. And Pat, N2IEN, is a very interesting character because his name is Pat Dolan. And Pat is, the Dolan family is famous. And I'll tell you why you might know who they are. They own the Madison Square Garden. They own the New York and the Knicks. This little sphere out in Las Vegas. And so he happened to bring along his helicopter. He would fly us back and forth. He was a pretty cool guy to know. A lot of fun. And Lou, N2TU, Lou and I have done DXpeditions together. We've co-led them and planned them together. He's just a great guy. We had a lot of fun. Larry W0PR, this was his very first DXpedition. He's always been a contester and a DXer, but he never had the experience of going on a trip like this. So he was a newbie, and we had a lot of fun with, you know, it's really hard unless you've been a contester and you've dealt with pileups. But when you literally have tens of thousands of hams calling you, and being able to handle that is really not easy. You have to learn how to do that and manage it so it doesn't get totally out of control. And so by the time he was done, he was smiling, he was happy, and he'd really learned, and he's ready for his next one. I'll put it that way. Adrian, K08SEA, Eileen was talking about him earlier. Adrian goes on almost every DXpedition. Yeah. And he just won, he's in the CQ Hall of Fame for DXpeditions. And he just got that award this spring at Dayton at the Hamvention. And of course myself, just another guy. Our major sponsors, we used All Flex Radio. And so I have All Flex Radio at my station. I'm an advisor to Flex Radio, in fact. And we picked them this time because we wanted an ease of operation. And of course, we wanted to use some new technology. So they said they would provide us with 6 stations. So we had 6 6600s, 6 Maestros, the radio sport connections. We had the PGXL amplifiers. What's cool about them, because we knew we were going to only have 120 volts, the PGXL amplifier will operate 120 to 240. So all you do is put the right plug on it, plug it in, and it worked. So DX Engineering, of course, has helped almost every single DXpedition, and they vow to help almost any DXpedition. So it's just a matter of what do you need? You need a 30-meter vertical, you need a 40-meter vertical, you need, what do you need? And they helped us with all of lots of antenna parts. And of course, NCDXF, I happen to be the vice president of NCDXF and Glenn's the treasurer, secretary, excuse me. But you know, what we do is we remove ourselves from that. So they submit the application for the award from the foundation, and then they give you a grant to pay for it. And our biggest expense was about $100,000 in jet fuel. So we had 2 helicopters. We had Breton Air, which is a commercial helicopter service, and then we had, of course, Pat's fuel as well. So that was our biggest expense. Logistics, we chose to have a helicopter to and from the island, ground transportation to Dingwall and Nova Scotia. So we just did that on our own. I paid for it, Glenn paid for his gas, and Murray, he made 2 trips. I gotta tell you, driving out there, it's 2,000 miles, almost exactly. It's 30 hours each way. And I have a new appreciation for Canada. I had no idea what Canada was like, but after crossing Canada, I really thought it was great. Anyhow, water and gas was actually delivered by a boat. I went down there trying to figure out how in the world that they did that, but they actually went in that tittle and into a place where the water would be quieter, and then they were able to put a bar across a crevice and pull the water up that way. And I thought, my gosh, they did it. So this is all the gear. I got refurbished Dell computers that come off lease. They were 1 year old. So I had i7s, 32 mega RAM, solid state drives. I bought some neat little displays that you can use, that we use for digital, like FT8. So we had more capacity, and I'll show you that. They were like $75, very inexpensive. And then we set up, of course, a computer network. So all the Flex gear operates off of a TCP/IP network, and so you can have all the traffic. The other thing we did was we had a Starlink internet connection. Way cool thing. This is the new portable one that you can take anywhere, and this is Glenn's actually, and it's very high speed, low latency, and what it did is we just poked it in the WAN connection of the router, and then we had internet right to the machines. Now, we didn't do anything any real internet activity using the stations other than uploading the logs to Club Log. So we did that every single day. However, all of us there's Wi-Fi on this, the router of the Starlink, and so we were able to make phone calls just as if we were at home. It was way cool. So if you don't have really good internet at your house, yeah, I bought one. I thought, wow, this is way cool. So this is how it all started. Flex drops it off at my garage. I couldn't even get in my garage. I had to move all these boxes over to the station. And then in the station, when you go over there, you can see I have a garage, and I just set up what they did is they made a layout of what our operating tent would be like when we get on the island, and I set it up exactly that way. So in other words, here's 3 stations, and I had 3 more stations on just opposite that. And so I went through every single station. I set up all of the software so that it would operate. I wanted to make sure, so if you sit down and you type CW, into the entry window it goes to CW. If you hit SSB, it goes to SSB. If you put FT8 in, it opens up FT8. If you put in RIDI, it brings up MMTTY. So I had it all automated. Operator, all you had to do was just sit down and go to work. Piece of cake. So there's all the PGXL amplifiers all stacked up. And this is the display I was talking about. Probably made in some town in China somewhere. But for 75 bucks, what it did, it just plugged in a USB-C here and it powered it. And so it gave us an additional display. So if you look on here, that's the entry window for N1MM and the log. And then over there separately, using the same computer, so FT8 would log the QSO, it'd shove it into the log of N1MM, and then we could take the log and then we'd upload it to Club Log so that you guys knew that you were in the log. You could do this at home, by the way. Everything I'm talking about is stuff that you can do. This is Scott and I just ready. You can see, here's all the Maestros and all of there's the 2 Pelican cases. All of the radios and the amplifiers are all right behind the seat up there. So if we had to slam on the brakes, they'd at least hit the seat and not us. So here we are. Instantly, 30 hours later of driving, we're in Dingwall, Nova Scotia. I have to tell you though, we would stop for dinner and rest areas like that, but one night we stopped in eastern part of Quebec, very near New Brunswick, villages, unbelievable. If you've never been there, I was just amazed at the French atmosphere. It's very quaint and it's really cool. So I'm not with the Chamber of Commerce of Quebec or anything, but this is actually the view that from the office where we checked in. All we did was we rented the cabins until we could go to the island. And it said go to the beach, so I went down to the beach. There's nothing but rocks down there. But This is what the cabins look like. There's no TVs, nothing in there. What's really interesting about this is Cape North, and right there you can't hardly see it, but that's St. Paul. The next view is where it's centered. There's St. Paul sticking out of the water there. Remember, that's 470 feet high at the tallest mountain, so there, you can see that's 20-some miles away. Here we are getting ready to go. Scott, and right here is Larry. That's Murray, the leader. And up in the front seat, and the co-pilot was Glenn Johnson, because he's actually a licensed helicopter pilot, among other things, that he is. There's Glenn, very happy to be sitting there. And that's the helicopter that they used. And do we have audio here? We're going to find out. No, we don't.
Maybe turn up the volume on the laptop.
Okay. That'd be cool. Is this the sound right here? Malfunction?
Yeah.
It's all the way up.
Play that again and see if it'll work.
Yeah, okay. No. Well, there's a loud roar of helicopter.
Anybody do Foley or sound effects?
Yeah, well, there's actually several of them that's kind of cool to, but anyhow, pretend you have audio. It says it's on right there, so I don't know. But that was them taking off. That was our very first trip. Now, I want you to imagine what just happened here. They just went to an island. They had no luggage. Those guys all went to that island. Their luggage hasn't been sent yet. So think about your situation if you were in their seats. So here's all of this. So we're going to load all that stuff, and you can see the net. See the netting? So you can see how we stack all of their gear. That's actually Glenn Johnson's medical gear. He's a doctor. Yes?
I think I know why there's no audio.
Okay.
Because it's set for FT8, it's not using the system card.
Oh, okay. Yes?
Did you have any problem with customs and all that stuff?
Well, it's a good question. We always thought we were going to have problems because sometimes they've had problems going across. And the key word is that it's not commercial radios. It's personal. Everything you bring in is personal. Remember that. It's always personal. And if I had said that this is radio gear from the Flex Radio, I would have had to have a form filled out for the transit of that gear. And so just something to remember if you borrow something for somebody or you're taking somebody else's even luggage with you, that this is all my own personal gear. And what's interesting, I have a global entry, and so does Scott. So when we were actually coming back, and we came back another way, we came through Maine. When we came back through U.S. Customs, that person already knew everything about us. So they, you know what I mean? The person that's the customs agent, and you're just stopped at the border, and they're looking, and they're just, it's like second guessing you on everything. Well, who are you? What do you work? What did you do for work? Where did you work? All those, did you answer the right questions? You know, so really we ended up with no problem, but every single time they wanted to look in the back and make sure we didn't have bodies and whatever, or more fish than we should have had. Or.
Did they ever worry about you taking it in and selling it?
Yeah, when you say you have commercial, then they have a problem with that. The other, so that, perfect.
That's fine. That's how we do it.
That's fine. At least they get the effect of it. So I was going to make another comment about that.
About commercial versus
Customs,
customs paying for selling the radios or something. There's no way to sell them to.
Yeah, oh, they asked us one thing. So are you bringing back anything that you didn't bring with you in the first place? And so the answer was we each bought one bottle of Canadian whiskey called Signal Hill, which is in Morse code. And so what we wanted to do was find a bottle of that because it was actually created near Marconi's site. And you know who owns that? Dan Aykroyd. Can you believe it?
He owns the Signal Hill whiskey
Yeah.
distillery?
Yeah, yeah, and I guess he has a vodka too. But who knew? What a cool. Yeah, yeah. Get you the full effect here. I tell you, Matt was the pilot, way cool. When we went to Beauvais, we did not have way cool helicopter pilots. This guy would have been the guy you want to take with you to Beauvais or someplace like that. This guy was a military guy, and he's used to doing this, and you could tell the difference. He was a pro. And they had a guy there named Barry that staged all this stuff. And so you saw that one, and then here is a sack, and we just filled that sack. We put 8 generators in it, we put fuel in it, and they just lifted it straight up and went and gone. It was so cool to see. Now the radios didn't go that way, but you see here's all the antennas right here. Those are actually my bags, and that was before I didn't know that I wasn't going that night. I sent my bags because it's just the way it worked out. So this is actually, this says N12 New York. That means News 12 New York, because Pat owns Newsday and Channel 12 in New York City. So anyhow, that's his little helicopter there. And then we were loading the radios in there. So the Meisters are all strapped in like humans, little humans. And of course, here's all the radios and all the amplifiers. They're all strapped in. And by the way, this is long-term parking at this guy's field. So Glenn and I just left our vehicles parked there. This farmer was so cool. He's just an old guy, and he says, "You guys need to go to the bathroom. You need a drink of water, and you just come down here." So 11 o'clock in the morning, we go down the hill, and we go to his house, and he sits us down while we're waiting our turn, and he starts, "Well, what's your name?" And I said, "My name is Craig." And he says, "Well, that's a good old Scottish name," and on and on and on, just like that. And then the conversation's going on because you could tell the guy hasn't had company in a while. So he says, "Any of you guys play a musician? Are you musicians?" And I said, "Well, a long time ago I played the piano." "Ah," he says, "I have a violin. You play with me." I said, no. But gosh, this guy was just a riot. What a hoot. And he mowed this all for us, and he just treated us. So we actually gave him a generator when it was all done, because he had no other source of electricity, so now he's got electricity. He had the old stove like you'd see in your grandmother's house, a wood stove. When you sat there, it was like being taken back, last century. So here we are. So what had happened is we ended up staying overnight. Mikey had come in. That's Pat, N2IEN right there, and myself. Everybody wears a headset. Everybody talks to each other. That's what you do. And of course, I was looking at this, and Pat's got this outfit. He's got a little iPad sitting here with additional stuff. I was looking at all the technology of the helicopter. It's really fun to see. Anyhow, here we go. This is what it's like to ride in the helicopter. How many have ridden a helicopter? So you've had that experience. Dingwall, the actual hotel, was right in this area, and here we are taking off, and right over that direction is where we're going to go. But look at how steady it was. We didn't have to worry about the gear being shook or any of that stuff. Very steady.
Did you take this all with a phone, or did you have?
I used my phone.
That was all off your phone?
Yeah, all off my phone. Here we are coming up to St. Paul Island. They call this the southwest corner, and we were at the northeast corner. So the island was like this, about a 45 degree angle. So here we are coming up to it. You can kind of see there's some little bit of fog over it right now. It clears up as we go, but it kind of settled in all the time. And there was this mist from the ocean all the time, so everything felt salty and wet. So here we are crossing. And you can see how high it is or gets. And back a ways there were actually lakes. That is actually where we stayed, right here. So you can see the difference. But notice the rocks and how cut and how they are shoved up out of the ocean floor. So here we are coming in, which I thought was cool. And of course the guys that have been there overnight are right there waiting for us, like, "The plane, the plane." That used to be the helipad, and they cut it up because it was rotting. They didn't want anybody to accidentally land there. So there's no nothing. Permission from Parks Canada to land there, so you have to have permission. Getting a license was easy. Glenn was licensed VE, and then also there's another person on the team that was also a licensed VE, so it made it easy to actually get a license. They actually took the test to get a license in Canada. So I just a couple of things with the scenery, double rainbow, which I thought was cool. There's the pot of gold, the winds of St. Paul, just to get you some of the experience of it. So anyhow, here we are, the shack wind. This is where we're trying to operate. I just stopped because I thought, this is crazy right now. The filters are actually sliding in on top of me, and I thought, I need to take a picture of just what it's like in here so that people know what we're dealing with. Those filters were up against the wall. They were encroaching on my area. They were coming closer and closer to me. So I'll explain the station layout in a minute. This is actually Team B. We had 3 teams. So we had Team A, B, and C. And so they all took different shifts, and I'll show you that in a minute. But on this team, that's Mike K9NW, Scott N9U, and of course Larry W0PR. But you can see the 3 stations that are along here. Those 3 stations were for CW and sideband predominantly. The stations on the right were set up to be digital. And so one operator would operate all 3 stations at once. So we had them set up in what's called Super Fox, and then later Foxhound FT8. And one operator would just make sure that they were always stacked, because we had thousands of callers, and we would just put them in the queue, and then it would work people. So in behind Scott is the filters and the amplifiers and the antenna switching. Here's actually Scott with the 3 digital stations, making sure that they're all fully in queue. And when you come in, when it's your turn to operate, you would say what band you want to be on, and then you would take each cable was labeled 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You take cable 1, cable 2, whatever that you had, and you plug it in the antenna that you were going to use for that part of the operation. And I'll show you where that's at. This is actually the VHF station. Lee loves to do this when we were on Sable. He did this before, he's done it. For instance, I worked Sable, I had worked St. Paul myself, and I had it from 160 meters through 2 meters. And I had worked it on EME, believe it or not, myself, on one of the last DXpeditions. So thanks to these guys, you know, from previous DXpeditions for doing that. I'll show you the antennas here. So the actual team schedule, you'd be 4 hours on the radio, 8 hours off, 4 on, 8 off, 3 on, 6 off, and then it starts all over again. So think about that in terms of sleeping. Think about that in terms of getting rest and being sharp. It's never at the same time that you sleep now. Never. And what's neat about the schedule, though, as an operator, is you get to experience all of the sunrises and sunsets of the world as the DXpedition goes on. So if you follow what I'm saying? So sure, you might experience a U.S. sunrise. What does that mean? Well, it's the same thing as we sunrise here. The bands start opening because the sun is coming over, over the horizon. And as the day goes on, the MUF rises. You're on higher bands, 10 meters, whatever. And so at night, it's the same thing in inverse. Now you go down, you got 30, 40, 80, 160. So you have to be conscious of that, because a ham in Europe wants to talk to us on, say, 160 meters. It has to be at our gray line. So the gray line, if you get the chance to operate at that gray line, you need to be on 160 so you can talk to guys on the eastern side of Europe, because what's happening, the sun's going to rise on them. They will no longer have 160 meters, so you have a window of opportunity to talk to those stations. So you just got to be conscious of that as an operator to know what's going on. Of course, Carl's an expert on propagation, but what happens is when you go on a DXpedition like this, you have the full experience of sunrises and sunsets across the world seeing. And the other thing we experienced was solar conditions. During our DXpedition, I'll show you this, the sun got angry for a few days and made our geomagnetic field become, contrarian to propagation. And you can see that affected us, what bands we could operate on and how many stations we could talk to. And then again, the band conditions improved. So I'm going to give you just a kind of a tour. We have a 12 and 17 meter Yagi, and how we did this, we would use a diplexer and filters. So you'd have a diplexer and a 12-17 filter with one feed line to the antenna. Okay? So then you do this high power, and if you operate and you have a setup like this, if somebody's on 12, you won't even know that they're on 17. If you're on 17, you won't even know you're on 12. It works very well. It's quite effective. So if you're actually, I show a couple of verticals that we made. Here's a 30-meter vertical. This building used to be the lightkeeper's house. And this roof was deteriorated, so we took a broom and we poked a hole in the roof, and we took, those spider rods and extended them, and we just made a 30-meter vertical. We just pushed it through. That way it didn't need guys because the roof was holding it in place. But then we put radials out in all directions. So what we do is we use DX Engineering radial plates, and we coil up wires at the right length, 430, 40, 60, so that they're ready to go. And so when we get there, all you have to do is just clip, roll them out, and then when we're done with the expedition, we roll them up again and take a piece of tape, or we take a tie wrap and just cinch them up so we're ready to go on the next DXpedition. So it's fairly quick. The other thing you get on a DXpedition is you're making antennas all the time. We don't go with anything pre-made. We make them. So it's kind of cool, you learn, what's the rule, get the tape out, let's make an antenna. So, and that's what we do. And by the way, that 40, we had initially put up a 40-meter dipole on top of the lighthouse, and then we decided that we wanted to change our 80 and 160. So we converted the 40 to an 80-meter dipole because it's 150 feet up. That's pretty high. And then we went ahead and built that 40-meter vertical, and it gave us another band. The other thing is it's cross-polarized with the other antennas. So with in-band, you don't have very much interference with other bands. So every band, of course, was filtered. We always had filters, high-power filters, at least 50 dB of isolation, minimum. You saw the 432. This is 6 meters. They're right next to each other. The 432 was actually doing moon bounce. This is the 6-meter antenna. When we first arrived, he was working Europeans on 6-meter FT8, which is way cool. Then you can hardly see it. You can see a post right here in an inverted V. And we got on 60 meters about maybe halfway through the DXpedition. And we did FT8, and then later I did CW myself. And that's the first time I'd ever done that, because if you've ever been on 60 meters, you know they're channelized, and you've got to be right in the center of the band for CW. And so that's what I did, but then you get a pileup right on you because nobody can tune off. And then so when the Europeans were saying split, split, and then I found out later 5354, I think it is the frequency that they can operate. And then what they would do is they'd be maybe 50 hertz apart. And I could take my receiver and work them 50 hertz apart, split, and work quite a few. So here's Team A. We have Murray and Adrian. And what's funny about Adrian joined us with about halfway through. And Adrian was actually at Jarvis Island just prior to this at N5J. After he got done with Jarvis, he was on a boat, and as soon as he got to American Samoa, he got on a plane, flew to New York, got on a jet, flew to Sydney, and then they picked him up in the helicopter and brought him. So he joined us right in the half. It was really a riot. He's a great guy. And of course, Mr. CIA with the Cowboys hat on, Dan. And also, same part of the team was N2IEN, but he was actually on a helicopter trip back to the mainland. This is a tri-bander, an A3 Yagi. You probably have had them, TA-33s, anything like that. Same sort of thing. It's short mast. It's only up maybe 10 feet or so. But of course, you got to remember where we're at. We're on a rock above the ocean, and so it works quite well. And so again, we took a triplexer with filters for 10, 15, and 20, and we were able to use them simultaneously. So on the lighthouse, we were not allowed in it, and once you stuck your head in it, you could see why, because the entire stairway is rusted away, and you would die doing that. The only time I'd ever climbed a lighthouse, I was at Navassa Island, which was number 2 at the time, And I climbed up the entire stairway of, it's one of those things where the stairs goes around the whole thing like this. Carefully climbed it all the way up to the top and put a 160-meter sloper up there down to the ground. So that was my only experience. So what we did here, we did what you would do. You would take a slingshot and you'd shoot up a fishing line, which is what we did. You'd drop down. We would take another lighter rope, and then we would pull the lighter rope up, and then we'd pull up the antenna. So that's how we did all of those antennas. This is St. Paul Power and Light with Honda generators. And I tell you, anybody got those 2,000 watt Honda generators? They're really fantastic. And I'd highly recommend them because they just purr. Find about them, if they'll cause a power surge if you put it in the eco mode. You need to let them run at normal loads with ham radio. Whether it's FT8 or if it's CW or anything like that, you're better off just letting them run at standard rate, because what happens is it sends a pulse down the line, which is not a good thing. The UPSs would all fire off, and that's not, we eliminated it by switching modes. And we kept all the fuel inside, keep the water. And actually, the 10 meters was so good, we decided to put together a Yagi, just 410, and that was aimed at Europe right there, and it worked very well. This was sleeping tents. We had some guys that had CPAPs and that sort of thing, so we made sure that they had generator power so they could sleep with a CPAP. This is actually our bathroom. How nice. So you take a Lowe's bucket and you put a nice little lid on it, and that's what you do. And they have these little bags that you put them in, and then you have to dispose of them properly. So just so you know, I mean, that was part of the rules when you went on the island, that there will be no evidence of humans anywhere when you're on the island. And then we had the shower. There's Glenn. This is actually, I don't want you to think he's really naked here, but you can see our shower consisted of this, and I'm going to tell you, you get the soap on you and then you want to rinse it off, and it's so cold that it about makes you jump out of your skin. But that's our experience. And of course, this is our food right here. We actually, the life-saving part of this thing is we had Keurig. We could have coffee. When our shift started, we could walk down there and start a generator, make a pot of coffee or a cup of coffee, and have that. But that's where we'd warm our water because we had to eat dried food. We all brought our own foods as to what we would eat. And normally you'd have like an oatmeal or something like that for breakfast. And then at night you wouldn't want to eat anymore. And then later at night you might have a meal of that because it's not great, but it's better than nothing. So this is the tent the three of us slept in. And then a couple more guys slept there that didn't need power. This is actually looking down. What happened is we had a filter fail on 12 meters. So remember I said triplexer, 1217? And so what happens when you don't have a filter, you interfere with other stations. And there's not much you can do about that other than this. So we were brainstorming, how can we solve this problem? We actually sent out a message to all the Canadian hams, anybody got a 12-meter filter, we'll pay to fly it in, blah, blah, blah. What happened is we ended up locating 300 feet away on that post a 12-meter Yagi. So 300 feet, and you don't even know anybody else is on. So that's all you needed was the isolation from the other stations. So that's how we solved that problem, and that's how we got it back on 12 meters. So here's Team C. Of course, myself, Lou, and Glenn, we all look like we're really happy, and we are. This is all of the filters. Those are high-power filters, and those are made by LBS, which is a Russian ham. And for quite a while, DX Engineering was selling it, but since Russia got into it with Ukraine, LBS has kind of quieted down in terms of, because nobody can import or export anything like that. So, but we had these from previous DXpeditions. We'd used them at Pitcairn Island. We were going to use them at Beauvais and several other DXpeditions. So we knew that they worked. That's the triplexer. That's, and then all the PGXL. So what I did is I had marked everything on station one, little stickers. So they were 1 through 6. And so then what would happen is station 1 was over here, it would go over and drive the amp, and then the filter, and then that would appear here on the filter was part of the antenna system. So you just say, I wanted 40 meters, it would go from there to the 40-meter filter and out to the antenna, and the amp just would be the output of that. So that way nobody would make mistakes. You know, you're plugging into your antenna, and that was your band to be on. Great field day setup. This is what it looked like for people calling us on FT8. Just a mass of signals. Lots of callers. This is what it looked like, the screen fills. So here's the callers that are calling us. Here's the queue. In this particular case, they were all JAs. So remember, JAs were the hardest. So we would filter this for JAs. So if you were calling us when the JAs were coming in, we would not even put you in the queue. We would only select the JAs or the BYs or people like that that were in the Far East, because we knew that would be like a 30-minute opening and it'd be done. So we were cautious about that because we want to make sure we got a lot of people on the log that really, really needed it. And then later, when that opening went away, we don't to everybody again. But what's neat about FT8 is you can actually filter by distance. You can do it by signal level. You can do it by grid location, or you can do it by zone. So you have all these filtering methods. And then another thing you can do is go by continent. You could actually not even have people appear here that called you, say, I don't want any of North America. No North America stations would appear. So it's really kind of a nice feature. So we put up our major sponsor there, the DX Engineering on the side of the building, but it gives you a good perspective of things. And we had assigned majors for our team. Here we are. That was the last load off the island. And here he's carrying two at once. The bad part about that, there was 4 of us humans left on the island and nothing to do, because everything is gone now. And here we are getting ready to go back, very happy to go. And then we're off. And I want you to know that you couldn't tell that we were there, other than there were some water bottles that got picked up a week later by the same guy that delivered them, water and gas bottles that we had left for him. There's a weather station on the island. They had maintained it while we were there. They flew in and maintained it, but that's the only other human. There's cameras and a weather station. That's it. They actually have a museum, so if you go to Dingwall, that was the real lighthouse that was on the southwest corner of the island, on the island. And when they replaced it with electronics, and the lights went away, that they transported that here and they rebuilt it here. It's just a nice little museum. So how did we do? Well, if you go by this, the band mode, I know you can't see it, but for instance, on 160, we made 2,287 contacts. In other words, 2% of our total. So the total was 114,843. So it was 2% of that total. So you say 80, how did we do? CW, we made 1,654 Qs. FT8 2805, sideband 984 for a total of 4.7. So you can see the big bands for us, if you look at the totals, 20 was number 1. And we did that on purpose. So that band is open all the time, probably day right now. And so the more you're on a band, the easier it is to work a guy that's never worked it before for an all-time new one. Because it can be so upsetting to get into a pileup and everybody is beating you. And you wait a little bit in a DXpedition, all those guys have worked it and they go away. The only people left are the people with 100 watts and a wire, or 100 watts and a vertical, or something like that. So the longer you stay on a band, the better it is for all of those people. So that's the goal of that, is to have uniques at the end. By that I mean first time, how many people you just worked that one time for a new country. So daily QSOs, and this is the impact of, so here we are, we're starting on August 25th, 382 that night, very quick operation. Operating all night, we made 14,711. So you can see 15,000. Propagation changes, 10, 357, 13, 238. This is where we get hit with a CME. We can actually see a over towards, we were not far from Newfoundland too, so you could see Newfoundland off in the distance. Just to the left of Newfoundland was Aurora, just right over the horizon. You can't see that here where we live. So I was always hopeful to be able to do something like that, you know, in real life. Of course, we had a chance earlier this spring to see it ourselves, but it's very unusual to actually have that happen. But you can see when the bands came back, that again, the QSO totals jumped back up over 10,000 a day. So we felt really fortunate to make that many contacts. So again, continents by band. This is important because, for instance, Europe made almost 54% of the contacts. Remember where we're at. We're right between Europe and the United States. So the band opens early. You get all, you know, back to them. We're getting the sunlight first. We talk to them. Then the band, as the day goes on, then we start talking to the United States. Then you look, Asia was the next highest. Because of our efforts, 7,503 Asians were able to get in our log. This is kind of the density of activity, so you can see where people are operating. And all this information is available, by the way, on Club Log. We thank all of our sponsors. The Northern Illinois DX Association is here in our state, and they're the principal. They support a lot of DXpeditions in our area, but these are the principal ones, and all of the other people that donated to help support us. And with that, if you have any questions, I'm done.
When you made your log 300,
Thank you.
the 300-foot line for the 12 meter, was that on RG213?
Actually, we started off that way, and then we ended up with RG8X because.
Thin down as you got there?
Yeah.
Ran out?
Yeah. Well, we used what we could. We had a lot of RG8. We used as much RG8 as we possibly could. But I got to tell you something about DXpeditions. And this is we don't even run high power a lot of times. We might be running 100 watts, 200 watts. Our call adds 10 dB. Just because we're rare. Everybody's calling us, you know, so. And the other thing is you have to control the number of callers because sometimes it gets totally out of control. So if you keep your power down, it kind of minimizes the number of callers. And like I said, after you wait a day or two, all the big stations have now worked it. They're out of the way. Now you turn up the power. Now you get more callers of the weak guys. And that's how we manage it so that everybody gets a chance to, you know, work us. So, yeah.
The lighthouse automatic? Or is there anything?
There's nothing in there. It's all electronic.
Weather station and
Yep, it's all electronic in terms of warning to the ships right now. There's no lights, nothing. Yeah.
you on 160, do you use beverages or?
Actually, we just used the transmit antenna. It was actually it's a very quiet location. We did notice some, after he maintained the solar panels and the inverter, all of a sudden we had a new noise. And it was very disgusting. And so I had actually gone out there and I knew how to disconnect it, but I thought, let's see what we can make. You know, I could have shut off all of that, and because they left the cabinet open, it was just pop it open and go in and you can just pull a wire and you wouldn't have inverters, you know, causing a problem. But anyhow, we were able to work a lot of stations, obviously, despite the noise. What we did is we changed our frequency from what we had publicized to a frequency where there wasn't any inverter experience or noise. This happened to us once before. We were on Palmyra. Very proud that when we just arrived at the island, they go, "You guys are so lucky. We just changed to all new solar panels and we've got you know, all of the system in place." And we're going, "Oh, we're lucky." And we were setting up and we were operating along where the ships would come in to deliver supplies and stuff. And so here's the big antennas and all that, and we had a receiving antenna, and we put it in the back. It was a SAL-30, and we put it right behind the shack. And so we fired up, and we went on 80 well, actually on 160, like 1825 was like the peak of the noise, and it was like 20 over 9. Impossible to work weak stations. So the next day, we took that SAL-30 and moved it 200 feet. It was like it wasn't even there, but the inverters were right next to our shack, you know, and they were just very noisy. So you have to be cautious. You know, again, I think what happens is technology is improving and enough people are complaining about EMI that they're making them better. But still, the whole noise floor of everywhere is going up, 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 simply because of all of the solar panels. Yep. Anybody else?
What was your take on the Super Fox mode?
Okay. Interesting that you would ask that question. We learned a lot. We were observing N5J's operation because they were the first operation. We were going to be the second. And the public release is RC6 version of WSJT. And so we were using that. That's what I'd loaded. And literally 2 or 3 days after we got into it, we said, you know, we have strong signals calling us and we're not decoding them. Or we're calling them and we're not decoding them as an acknowledgement. We never finished a QSO. We thought, this is really bizarre. So then we sent an email to Joe Taylor and we said, hey, we got a problem. And then that kind of circulated because they have their own group of programmers. And so then we ended up with N5J's version of WSJT. And then we ended up with another version written by a guy out in Seattle. He's one of the coders for them. And he said, this will be released in RC7, I believe. That's coming out pretty soon. And, but anyhow, it started decoding better, but it was still not going below -15. Still not. So we were working everybody when signal to noise ratios were good. In other words, like 10, 15, 20, whatever, those bands were open. That was excellent. And you were working guys really good. But what would happen is once you started, like if you called and you were -24, sorry, not going to make it. So we switched to Foxhound. Worked guys down -28, -24, -25 was not a problem. So in our discussions with them, we know that there's some improvement that can be made. I just got an email yesterday because you also know that you need a key to operate SuperFox, and somebody's broken the key, how to generate the key already. So RC7 will actually contain a version that you cannot break it. Because I don't know if you know ND2T, he used to work for a 3-letter agency in Washington, and he's part of the, that's what he does. And so it will not be broken next time. So that'll be coming out in RC7. So good question. So we had our issues, and I actually sent them logs, and what they're going to do is try to match up with other logs from other stations as to what was going on. Try to figure out, try to match it up.
That's kind of what it seemed like from this end too.
Yeah, it was frustrating for us because we.
The signals are strong. You just move.
Yeah, why aren't we working? Yeah, very frustrating. So, anything else? If not, thank you very much. I hope you enjoy the weekend.